That is.
And welcome once again. Go Big 12, go or go home. I'm Brandon Shanahan, joined by Iowa broadcasting legend Drew Russell. Outstanding week of college football. We're here to talk about it, diving in on Big 12 play getting underway last week. So I'll tell you what, Drew, I'm feeling a little bit better about some of the teams that I was nervous about for the Big 12. Not the best showing for the four new schools getting their initiation. I would say into their first conference games. Houston's getting theirs out of the way last week. But how'd your weekend go?
Good weekend overall. Saw some great football across college football. Was up in Ames to watch Iowa State, which good win for the Cyclones over Oklahoma State. But a pretty interesting weekend when you look at kind of the Big 12. You got multiple teams at 4-0 in Texas and Oklahoma, but you also have a Kansas 4-0 as well. So really fascinating start to the season. A lot of great games across all of college football throughout the weekend. Ryan Day and Lou Holtz is a rivalry I never knew I needed till now. That's a different conference. But in terms of the Big 12, it was a very interesting weekend of football in which really we were able to see the home team find pretty good success in most of the games outside of road wins for Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think, first of all, the Lou Holtz thing was very funny to me, especially, that's an emotional win. It's a walk-off touchdown on the goal line. Granted, you only had to get past 10 defenders as opposed to the typical 11. But for that to be like the first thing he's thinking about is Lou Holtz. I don't care what Lou Holtz said. Look, that is insane.
It was just so out of the blue. I had no idea it even happened. And I'm thinking, he's going to be talking about how tough we are. I wasn't surprised about that Ohio versus everyone mentality. He was like, Lou Holtz, I got something to say. I'm like, what did Lou Holtz do? I didn't realize. I thought Lou Holtz, to be honest, I thought Lou Holtz was dead. So that was shocking to me. I was like, why is he bringing up Lou Holtz?
I just picture 86-year-old Lou Holtz in his big living room. He's got his TV on the fireplace. He's got his old man pajamas on. He's got his slippers. He's got a blanket to keep him cozy. You just watching this football game oh man, what a good game. Oh man, Notre Dame lost. Bummer. Did he just bring me up? Is he talking about me?
Lou Holtz loves it. He just loves it. He has what? How does Ryan Day? That's the first thing he thinks of.
Such a big game too, and that's Kyle McCord was great. The running game, it was tough. It was gritty. They got after it. The new faces came in. Marvin Harrison Jr. thought that he may not finish the game. He came back and had a great night. And Lou Holtz is the first name that comes out of his mouth. It's incredible.
Hey, and Lou Holtz had a response as well earlier this week when he said, I can't wait to watch them play Penn State and play Michigan. They're going to get a real test. I'm like, my gosh, this man is just digging deep.
He's doubling down.
And he might be onto something. I don't know. It was a missed chance for Notre Dame. But, it's tough to win. We have 10 guys on the field for the last two plays.
And I have a best friend who's a Notre Dame fan. And the whole time, he's also very pessimistic just in general. But he kept talking about how bad the coaching was and how bad the play calling was. I'm like, this Ohio State's really good. The coaching's fine. Stop crying about it. And then at 11 o'clock, I saw a clip pointing that out, that you only had 10 guys on the field for the last two plays. And I thought, man, I hope he doesn't see that. And 5 minutes later, I get a text message. I'm like, shoot. Can't believe it.
I almost was crazy enough for a couple Notre Dame fans I chatted with that I said, should we bring back Brian Kelly? I'm sure he could get rid of that Southern accent real quick if he had to.
I will say this. I'm very impressed with Marcus Freeman. Granted, he hasn't, accomplished much yet, but to keep that program stable and now get to a point where you're able to go in the transfer portal, get a very sought-after quarterback, Wake Forest's all-time leading passer, and Sam Hartman. And, even though you can't pull off the win against Ohio State's been an S-tier football program for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So if you can even look like you're playing the same sport with them, especially compared to how they looked last year against Ohio State. I'm way more impressed with the job that he's done than, say, a Brian Kelly who takes over a prominent school in a very hot recruiting bed.
Yeah, you're dead right, because Notre Dame, look, they do have higher academic standards. They do have certain things to get into school. So recruiting can be a little bit more difficult. Brian Kelly cited that when he left, that he wanted less standards when it came to recruiting the best talent in America. And you're dead right. Marcus Freeman, his team have done an outstanding job of creating a lot of enthusiasm for that program. For Notre Dame team that, they've played in one national championship game in this century, and they lost pretty convincingly over a decade ago to Alabama. So, do give them the credit where it's deserved. And yet at the same time, be aware that in college football, oh man, that week-to-week basis is wild. And now he's going to be put under more of a microscope, that if it's another close game and there are enough guys on the field, or if there's miscommunication between coaches and players or all that, that coaching staff is going to be under a more watchful eye going forward. So that's college football in a nutshell. Those type of mistakes, especially those big programs with pretty wild fan bases, boy, they don't forget them for a long time, and they're not tolerated very long.
And the thing that kind of caught me off guard with that specific situation is that he mentioned, he didn't want to rush a guy out there and get a penalty. The ball's on the 1 yard line. It's a 1.5 foot worth of penalty that you're giving up to fill a hole on the defensive line. It's one thing if you have like a safety or like an outside linebacker who may not provide like secondary coverage, but if you're inside the 1 yard line, you got to at least have your defensive lineman. And I had someone point out, like, it's not just on the coaches. Like, if you're a linebacker and you don't see somebody in front of you where you typically do, doesn't that draw some attention before it's too late per se? But I thought that was an interesting one. Like, if there is ever going to be a situation where you want to give up a 5 yard penalty, it's when it's only worth a 1.5 feet. That's inches.
And I'll add too, like, I think pretty stunning that a coach upstairs didn't see it for 2 consecutive plays. Like, look, you and I have been in enough press boxes in our life, Brandon, that there's usually a coach at the high school level, any level, that is up there, and they are counting, do we have enough guys on the field, or do we have too many guys on the field? It can work both ways. And the fact that that just didn't happen for Notre Dame 2 plays in a row on the 2 most important plays of the game is just straight up inexcusable. So pretty wild ending, though. And I guess, if they had 11 guys out there, then shoot, I guess NBC should have gotten to Lou Holtz in his recliner somewhere in America, because I'm sure he would have one heck of a statement about how weak Ryan Day is and Ohio State is. And I would have been as probably shocked or as entertained as I was vice versa.
I mean, there's like a 0% chance we ever know those Lou Holtz comments if Notre Dame wins that game. Because, I mean, like you said, I didn't even know he said anything until Ryan Day brought it up.
It was literally not new. Like, I mean, yeah, he did say it, but I thought, I guess I don't care. It wasn't that newsworthy. Yeah. So when he brought that up on national TV, I'm like, what is he talking about? And then, you're like, well, check on your phone quick and you read the quotes. And you're like, it's Lou Holtz. Lou Holtz just, you get a certain age, like, you just don't care anymore. I mean, Joe Namath this week just said Zach Wilson's a terrible starting quarterback and shouldn't be on the New York Jets. I thought, Joe Namath's over 80 years old. He can say whatever he wants. Yeah. You reach an age, I feel like that filter, who cares?
Yeah, it's and especially when it's a Notre Dame legend. Like, it's not like it's like a hard-hitting journalist who's, trying to, of course he's going to talk stuff about Ohio State. He's a Michigan guy or a Notre Dame guy.
Yeah. That's just natural. I mean, I would hope you kind of rep your school in some way, but, I guess whatever it takes to, fire it up. And hey, it happened across all college football this week. I mean, some teams are fighting for clicks and some teams are fighting for wins.
I mean, how incredible was that? Dan Lanning's a first team, first ballot Hall of Fame hater for those comments. And especially like allowing the network cameras into the locker room before that speech, and then the shellacking it, the backing it up of it all is just chef's kiss, outstanding stuff.
It was pretty humorous. I gotta hand it to the University of Oregon. That was creative, really clever to market how they did that, they came out with a video too, and all this stuff Colorado players were saying, "Oh, they're going to shellac them." And I thought, man, this is what people want, though. This is high quality content. That's why a lot of people look. It's why Colorado's fascinating. Deion's going to wear everything on his sleeve, and I think that's great. And it does create interest, and so people like those wars. They like the pettiness of when coaches or players go after each other. It makes the sport more fun. So, but that was the quote of the weekend. I don't care. That was an all-timer.
Without a doubt. And as a Nebraska fan, all the last few weeks and with that whole Colorado-Nebraska game, all I heard was Coach Prime talk about how personally he took that game because of comments that Matt Rule had mentioned that weren't very disrespectful in a way. Like even compared to like Dan Lanning's comments earlier in the year where he talked about how Colorado hasn't done anything since joining the Pac-12. Why would we be bummed that they're leaving? That's way more personal than Matt Rule ever said. And then when Husker fans online point that out, the swarm of Prime fans get in the comments and tell us to cry about it and this and that, and then just to see them on the other side of it, it's like, oh, there's no class there in Oregon. It's like it is outstanding backpedaling going on there in Boulder.
Yeah, you gotta, embrace it. And Prime did embrace it, and he had no problem with it. And he took more of his own shots, saying, "Be ready, though, we're coming." So I'm like, this is good. It's part of the motivation. So yeah, there's no backtrack. Like we're just gonna play through it. So yeah, it was a great weekend of college football across and the Big 12. Some pretty interesting games throughout the weekend as well. Not a lot of close games, but still some interesting ones that were intriguing.
Yeah, definitely seeing how some of these teams are kind of taking shape. Now that we're 4 games in, a third of the way through the season, you really kind of grasp how these teams are really coming together as we kind of hit that middle third of the season. And so we'll just get started with the game that you were at, Iowa State, Oklahoma State. I'll tell you what, Drew Russell, I'm not surprised that Iowa State won. I am a bit surprised in the manner in which they did.
For sure. No. And last week I went on a nice little rant about how it's going to be a defensive struggle, and it shows how little I know about sports because it was an offensive fireworks display in Ames. Iowa State passed the ball great. Rocco Bright, played great football with 347 yards, 3 touchdowns. Running games still pretty non-existent, but we're able to show things here and there. Oklahoma State was absolutely listless against South Alabama the weekend before. Their offense had a nice day, and Bowman was able to do some decent stuff, but the 2 interceptions, including throwing the game-winning or the game-ending interception to Tampa at Iowa State, that was kind of the difference in the game. But great game, big win for Iowa State, and kind of an interest. Again, we were kind of saying, for Mike Gundy for Oklahoma State, and then Campbell for Iowa State. Both fan bases, they love what these coaches have done for their programs, and yet it feels like there's a little bit of just uncertainty right now. They don't know what that future is for both those guys, or can they keep those programs at a high pace. And for Campbell, it's a big win. For Coach Gundy, kind of another one of those head-shaking losses of giving up 34 points to a team that was extremely limited offensively the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you talk about a team like Iowa State who isn't, cracking the top 5 as far as recruiting rankings go or getting 5-star guys in the portal, you typically see them want to run the ball well, be physical, because that's a lot easier to do than, to kind of drop back and dice people up. But it seems like more than anything, they're passing to set up the run, which is an interesting setup. I guess it fits on brand for Big 12 ball. But it's a little bit different of a situation when you go from Brock Purdy to Rocco, and I love Rocco. I think he's done a great job. And I'll also just give a lot of credit to Iowa State. Coming into the season with the gambling scandals, there was a lot of folks who didn't think they'd win a single Big 12 game, and I might be in that group. I'll have to double check my listings, but I certainly didn't anticipate them beating Oklahoma State. Now, I also didn't anticipate Oklahoma State being as bad as they are, but overall, I'm very impressed with Iowa State.
Yeah, I give them a lot of credit. And, defensively, they weren't at their best like they had been the first 3 games of the season on Saturday. The offense was able to come through. Special teams wasn't even that bad either. Got a couple big field goals as well. So, for Iowa State, go 2-2. You're at Oklahoma this week, which is a pretty vicious matchup overall. But there you feel like you're playing with a little more confidence following a win. And even though find that win in Norman's going to be extremely difficult, at least there's confidence in that locker room right now, and give them credit where it's due.
It does, in a way, kind of feel pretty on brand for Iowa State, how their season's gone, is that they have that big win against Northern Iowa, and you're like, all right, we're doing great. This is great. The defense was great. Special teams looks vastly improved. And then you lose to Iowa, that one, a tough one. But then you lose again to Ohio, and you're like, all right, well, now it's over. And then you beat Oklahoma State, and you're like, oh, well, now we're back. It just feels that typical roller coaster going on here for Iowa State. So I'm all here for it. I'm all aboard the Campbell Express.
Yeah, what's interesting, too, this is only the third time in the last 20 years Iowa State started Big 12 play 1-0. So that was a really interesting statistic I heard Saturday afternoon was, only a third time in the last 20 years they get that number. So, look, I know non-conference wasn't very good. I'm not even saying this conference slate will go well, but, nice to at least start that conference season with a 1-0 record and, try to build some positivity. And I know in that locker room, they're still looking for a bowl game, and they're going to have some work to do. And for Oklahoma State, I don't know what to say right now. Not a lot of energy on that sideline on Saturday. I don't know where they're at. It seems they're kind of treading water right now with Coach Gundy. And, I think they're fine. You got to let them ride out that season. But there just does not seem to be enthusiasm in that program right now. And that is, in the world of college football, you got to have momentum almost always on a continuous basis. And it just does not feel like for a team that's had so many great years under Coach Gundy, that's happening right now in terms of positive momentum for the program.
And, I mentioned this a little bit last week, but it's so important for the Big 12 to catch, and for any teams in the Big 12 to capture momentum now. Because with Oklahoma and Texas leaving, that's a huge power vacuum. It's like when the mob boss gets picked up off the streets, well, now who's going to fill his shoes? And not only do you have to compete with the other teams in the Hateful Eight who have been, competing, Kansas State won the Big 12 last year, Baylor just a couple of years removed, TCU played for a national championship last year. But then you also add these, a high-end group of 5 teams in BYU and Cincinnati won a national championship under coaching legend Scott Frost. Cincinnati made the playoff and the American Conference. And then BYU and Houston have had success here recently too. So now you have to compete with those guys. And then you add the 4 corner schools from Utah and Colorado and the 2 Arizona schools who are also going to be kind of thinking like, hey, we can come in right away. Especially teams who are having success this year, Colorado, Utah, I think we can take over the Big 12. We can be the team who's constantly winning championships there and constantly, earning a spot in the playoff and then competing on that highest level. And it seems like Oklahoma State's going the opposite direction, which is very troublesome. And for a program that's been so stable, you might look at this as the time to start, looking at other options.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Brandon, because if you told me 2 years ago when Texas and OU announced they're leaving, which program in the Big 12, in my opinion, was in best position to have a lot of success in this new conference era, Oklahoma State, I think, is my top choice. And it's just because they do have a legitimate track record of success with a coach that has been incredibly successful at his alma mater. So it made complete sense that this team should, on paper, find that success. And shoot, at this time last year, it felt like they were on track, but they don't finish last year very strongly. They get a lot of transfers in the offseason. They admittedly have not adapted to the times as much as other teams, and Coach Gundy's on record he said, we are going to do things how we've always done them, and that's found success. And the question going forward is, does that old way still work in this new era of college football where players do have a little more empowerment and can transfer and not necessarily, they're not penalized that initial transfer. Oklahoma State's going to have to adapt. And again, there's still 8 games left in the season. they could turn things around, figure things out. But it looked like a team that was almost playing its last game of the season at times on Saturday, just based on the energy of that sideline and other things too.
You're absolutely right. And it's not just Gundy who's not succeeding in this new era. You even look at a team like Clemson, who always recruits very well. But it seems like the only time they use the transfer portal is to get players that they don't like out of their program, and they don't ever refill those positions. And you're kind of starting to see that program wear down. Obviously, Oklahoma State doesn't have that same kind of success, recruiting wise, and so you're seeing them deteriorate a little bit quicker. But you're absolutely right. I mean, 2 years ago, after they beat Caleb Williams and sent Lincoln Riley to the West Coast after that win against in Bedlam, just literally a few inches away from winning that Big 12 championship game and maybe even making the playoff. Seeing how the putting pressure on the committee to pick 1 or 2 loss Big 12 team over Cincinnati. And then just to see how quickly it's evolved. And again, like we've talked about, it's not that they are necessarily doing anything wrong or doing anything even any differently than they've always done, but the whole game has just evolved so much quicker than they've been able to keep up with. And you're seeing that really fall apart now. Because as you said, I mean, this time last year, they had their eyes on another Big 12 title appearance. And now you're really searching for wins. You can't pick up a win against South Alabama. Hopefully circle Iowa State as a winnable game, and you can't come up with that. And I'd imagine it's a very nerve-wracking time in Stillwater.
Yeah, because in this era, especially the NIL era, if you get behind, boy, is it tough to play catch up. It really is. This is you got to catch lightning in a bottle era, whether you like it or not. Those old school, the old days of, all right, we're going to hire a new coach. We're going to give them 3, 4, 5 years to rebuild the program. We can accept a couple losing seasons to start the year. Outside of maybe the really bad schools or historically bad schools, that is just not an option anymore. That lightning in a bottle is people almost demand it in a lot of ways. And it's amazing as a football coach. Everybody knows that you could be the toast of a town real quickly, or you could be the most hated guy in that town fast as well. And Coach Gundy is a legend. He's done so much of that program, and they're going to always appreciate that. And this is not even close to being the end for him. He's going to try to find a way out. But boy, really the first time in this era under him, it just feels like the sky's falling a little bit on Oklahoma State. And that's tough to see because it has been just a great program the last 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, I'd even argue that out of all the Big 12 coaches, his seat might be the hottest as of right now. But kind of looking around the conference, somebody who I thought had the title of the hottest seat in the Big 12, Neil Brown, he's got the Mountaineers 3-1. Watch out.
Yeah, John Denver's going crazy right now.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's almost heaven in West Virginia. Is great win for them. I mean, Texas Tech, they lose Shaw in the first quarter, huge loss, and boy, they just looked horrible once they lost him offensively. West Virginia, I'm not really sure they have much of a quarterback play, but they were able to do enough on the ground. And, their defense did some really good stuff. Got a bunch of tackles for loss, really was able to limit the damage against Texas Tech. And, for Beaver and Morton, the backup, not good numbers, Brandon, 13 for 37 for 158. Did get the touchdown, but not good numbers. So, West Virginia, I don't know if this is exactly an upper tier team in the conference right now, but there is some life right now, at least in Morgantown, and they're fighting week in, week out. And if you told me before the season that they'd be 3-1 right now, I would not have believed it. So give them a lot of credit that they're here right now.
And I think when we talk about coaches and their impact in the locker room, I think where you really start to see, deterioration quickly with the program is when you throw a team out there and they're not dialed in, they're not scrappy, they're not competing out there against teams that maybe they should be at least competing with. And I haven't seen any of that from West Virginia. They have been really scrappy, even against Penn State, where they're outmatched pretty heavily in the talent department. And Drew Aller, 5-star guy, getting his coronation as the man in Penn State. Now they're extremely talented running back duo, what they do on the offensive and defensive lines. They were scrappy. The score may not have indicated that, but it wasn't an easy, 38-17 game as the box score might indicate. And then you play your rival, the backyard brawl in Pittsburgh. We even had that game circled like, hey, even if the season doesn't go very well, you win a lot of points in your region just by winning a game like this. And they went out and did just that. Wasn't an easy game, but very gritty performance. And then same kind of thing here. I mean, Texas Tech losing their quarterback and obviously not finding too much of a footing through the passing game, but just being able to scrap in there, and they came through. And even Texas Tech, it looks like they had a little bit of a comeback towards the end in the fourth quarter, but no panic with this West Virginia team. And I think that's a very good sign for coaching. Whether or not you get the Jimmies and the Joes in there, like they say, as far as recruiting goes in the transfer portal, but I'm seeing a lot of good things if I'm in Neil Brown's camp.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Texas Tech closes that game to 3 points early in the fourth quarter. You're thinking, okay, they're going to find a way to get it done, but West Virginia goes right back. They get a touchdown drive and are able to hold off the Red Raiders at the end. So a gutsy win for them. I don't know, because it kind of almost felt dead set that this is Coach Brown, barring a miracle, this could be his last season in Morgantown. And now you're thinking, if this team can find a way to reach a bowl game, I mean, they're going to be faced with a tough decision. And I think he can find a way to buy himself a little more time there. You give them a lot of credit. For Texas Tech, man, what a disappointing start to this season. To go 1-3 to begin the year. I think a couple of losses no one saw with Wyoming in week 1 and even West Virginia this week. Just disappointing for them. And I mean, you can't control injuries to key guys. But, outside of, Brooks at the running back position, they just did not do anything special. They really struggled in the defensive end at getting to the quarterback. Only 1 sack on the day. Did get a couple of interceptions, but the offense couldn't take advantage of that. So, for Texas Tech, after such a great year, year 1 for Coach McGuire, this has to, kind of be a gut punch for sure to start the year.
Talking about momentum and how important it is, it really felt like Texas Tech was really set up to, build on some momentum. They came together really well late last year, picked up a win against Texas, which always buys you a lot of points in that part of the state. But man, it feels like they just can't. And it is, like you said, a lot of it's injuries. Weird game in Wyoming. That's not an easy game. Going on the road at night, weather problems. But man, you're looking at down the barrel of a 1-3 record. Now you're on your backup quarterback, and things don't exactly get easy for Texas Tech here. I mean, they have a couple of winnable games coming up with Houston and Baylor, but then Kansas State going on the road to BYU, and then you play TCU, Kansas, which could very well be ranked teams at that time, and then you wrap up the season with Texas. You're really looking like you have to really get on your horse here if you're going to make it to a bowl game.
Yeah, no, and I think there is still time to turn this season around. There's plenty of wins still on the board. And, they're going to have to get healthy and they're going to have to find a way to grind out wins. I just don't know if they have the team to do it right now. If they look like their one of their losses against Oregon, they competed extremely well. They were very competitive. They could have easily won that football game. They didn't. So the talent's there, but they're going to have to put it together. And, like we just said with Oklahoma State, all those good vibes of even just a year ago or a few years ago, they get lost pretty quickly if you lose enough. And for Texas Tech and that program right now, they are feeling the effects of that.
You're right. And, I think the people inside the program are still very much bought in on the McGuire philosophy. And I think at the end of the day, they'll be fine. But it's a tough spot to be in. A team who I think has also bounced back pretty well, like Texas Tech is going to look to do here, is TCU.
Yes.
SMU coming to town, Iron Skillet. There's a lot of bad blood there. And, especially with SMU getting the charity invite to the ACC, they're probably feeling themselves. And TCU's defense, I think, played another good game. a lot of bend, don't break, and then just capitalizing on opportunities, capitalizing on turnovers. And that's, if you have a team that can do that and to kind of make hay while the sun's out as far as creating opportunities for extra possessions, that's going to go a long way. And we saw it, pay off in dividends last year with all the one score games that they won. But that's how you win those games is end a scoring drive prematurely.
Yep.
Take the ball away, capitalize on it, take advantage of opportunities that you have. And I think this was a very prime example of that. Only a 3-point game, 4-point game going into the halftime break, and then outscoring them 20-7 to kind of run away with it at the end. Huge win for TCU. And a game that looked like SMU might, kind of hang around with. But another great day from Chandler Morris. Another very efficient day, I should say. 265 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. And then the running game has been pretty good. And that's exactly the formula for TCU is if you can have productive backs like Amani Bailey had over 120 yards and a touchdown, then you can allow Chad Morris to really kind of settle in and take what the defense is giving him. And he doesn't have to force the ball down the field. And I'll also say this about Chandler Morris. He's got a lot of Baker Mayfield to him. Obviously, I don't know if the ceiling's there, not having, Lincoln Riley running the show. But, man, just the way that he plays, it's just it looks like the kind of guy that just goes out there and plays football, and it works out. Like Baker Mayfield is even shown in Tampa Bay. And maybe kind of like the same way that, same reason why we all fell in love with Johnny Manziel is that you just go out there and you make plays, and that's what he does. He doesn't do anything particularly special, but he goes out there and makes plays. So I'm really excited about TCU going forward here.
Well, their defense seems to have settled in a little bit as well. And I'm not saying they're seeing the type of QB play that they saw week 1 against Colorado, but, they are settling in there. And if their offense can keep rolling, Bailey is a really elusive running back. He is really creative. 12 different receivers get a catch on Saturday, which that was definitely neat for sure. So it seems that this team, after a tough week 1, everybody's thinking maybe last season, maybe it is a fluke. And, there are those pundits who are going to run with that stupid narrative. But they've come in, they've put together 3 really solid weeks of football. They're able to start the Big 12 season with a 2-0 start. And it seems they're kind of a 1-0 start. They win their skillet against their rival this week. So give them credit. A lot of season to go, but TCU settled in, and they're placing themselves to put together another really nice season.
And we've talked about this before. Narratives get written so early in the season, and that once they're kind of written, they're really hard to kind of work their way back from. And I remember when Colorado beat them, a lot of the narrative was, well, yeah, of course, you're playing a shell of a TCU team. You're playing their 2022 JV team pretty much. And while, there is some truth to that, they did lose a lot of talent. They really kind of settled down in a way where if you lose as 20-point favorites at home in week 1, the things can kind of unravel pretty quickly. But here's a stat for you. They gave up 45 points against Colorado week 1. They've given up 36 points since.
Wow.
36 points since. And that's, now granted, that's against Nicholls State and Houston and SMU. So it's not, barn burners, but really where they were exposed on national televisions, they've seemed to at least, even just temporarily plugged up the holes in the sinking ship and settled in. And I think that's a very promising sign towards what they're doing coaching wise, and kind of buying into what Sonny Dykes is selling and not necessarily giving too much weight to what's going on outside their doors.
Yeah, I mean, if you're only giving up 12 a game the last 3 games, it's such a winning formula. And you're seeing that right there for TCU. They got to have the defense to win. Offensively, as you mentioned, Brandon, Chandler Morris has put together some really, really nice starts. All 4 games, even week 1 against Colorado, offense was really sharp in general. So play within your system. Coach Sonny Dykes is doing a great job of really helping TCU make that transition. That was a really interesting storyline last year, and it's got forgotten about quickly because they won so much. But, Gary Patterson has all those years for TCU where, they won a lot. He is the reason in that program under Andy Dalton that wins a Rose Bowl game. They're the reason they're in the Big 12. I mean, that team was major in terms of let's get this team from the Mountain West to this new era of the Big 12. And so give them credit. I mean, there was, that last season their coach Patterson didn't live up to TCU's normal expectations. And Coach Dykes has done such a nice job. Dallas, Fort Worth area is such a great area to recruit in, not just for them, but also for, SMU and their charity status into the ACC. So, give them, they've done a great job and you have to hand it to them.
Yeah, I don't think that a lot of people know what to think about when it comes to Sonny Dykes, because if you just look back on what the narrative has been is, well, first of all, they lose the national championship game in the way that they did. So then you think, oh, well, maybe he's not, as good of a coach as we gave him credit for, despite beating every team on a schedule. And then the year before, kind of as that season was unfolding, looking back on that, you think, well, he all talent. He also had a lot of NFL players. Max Duggan was a Heisman runner-up. Quentin Johnson's a high pick for the Chargers. Keandre Miller is another good pick. They have a couple good offensive linemen playing in the NFL now. A lot of talent there. But then you also look, well, the year before he got there, they won 3 conference games, finished 4-3 total, and or 4-3 at home, 5-7 total. And that the roster had the same talent. He didn't overhaul the roster like Coach Prime did. So there's a lot of people just don't know what to think of Sonny Dykes. And I'll say this, I just think he's a really good football coach. And like you said, DFW is a huge recruiting area. He also has a couple of years coaching at SMU before TCU. So he's very familiar with how things are done down here and has great relationships with coaches. And I think he's going to be successful at TCU, which even the hiring of Sonny Dykes and getting rid of Gary Patterson, who did so much for the football program, transitioning them from Mountain West to, Big 12, contenders, there was a lot of pushback there as far as, well, I see what programs like Nebraska look like when you fire, good, not great coaches and can't get the right replacement. But they really nailed it with Sonny Dykes. And I think that it's showing just how well coached that team is.
For sure. It's going to be exciting to see what they can do, especially as we transition into the month of October.
Big month for sure. Lots of great stuff going on this week as well. We'll kind of run through these other games here. But it's another one that, I had talked about pretty aggressively last week, Baylor and Texas. I got to say, I got to buy into Texas now because I was real high. Like, hey, it's a night game. It's a blackout.
I know.
Baylor, they're desperate. They're hungry. They need this win. Texas, coming in, cruising, haven't shown too many kinks in the armor. And none of that mattered. It was 38-6. And it didn't even feel that close. It was such a shellacking. It was a rough take.
I really thought Baylor. Yeah, I was with you, Brandon. I bought into the it's going to be weird in Waco, and we're going to have a competitive football game. And give Texas credit. There was no ifs, ands, or buts of how this game was going to be decided. It was all Texas from the first play. Their defense is tough. They've really got some talent on that side of the football. And like Baylor, their rushing attack hasn't been great this year. As a team, they only had 60 rushing yards. 1.9 yards per carry. Just brutal. Texas was able to get 5 sacks. They got 8 tackles for loss. They have got some dudes on that defensive side of the football. And the offense, of course, that's what gets all the headlines. They have Brooks at running back. Ewers is continuing to do solid stuff at the QB play. That defense is really, really tough. And, again, that narrative of is Texas blank. Look, they are showing week in and week out they're going to seem to be a force to be reckoned with. And they've got a little bit of work this week. We'll talk about OU in just a little bit and their win over Cincinnati. But look, those two are on a collision course in a couple of weeks in Dallas. And that is going to be a potentially wild Cotton Bowl because both teams are full speed ahead right now. And it looks like they're on a collision course.
Yeah, you said it. We can't figure out if Texas is back until, December and January here, but they're passing all the tests. They don't slip up in the non-conference late. They beat Alabama on the road. They, take care of business, getting the conference underway with Baylor on the road. they're passing all the tests, and like you said, we kind of expected their offense to put up fireworks like they have, returning 10 starters, including Quinn Ewers, the entire offensive line, entire receiving corps is back. But the defense, they've played really solid, and it doesn't seem like they have the quite like the star power that their offense does. But man, they play as such a good cohesive unit that it's smothering.
Yeah, well, and they get that confidence winning or win back in week 2 against Texas, or excuse me, against Alabama, and I think that's done wonders for this team's confidence. I mean, they are genuinely playing confident football right now. Now, there's still a lot of season. There have been years in the last decade plus that Texas got off to a good start. They've hit a couple rough patches in between, so still a lot of work between there. But it seems like all the stars are lining up for this program right now. But it's early, and Baylor, it's been a tough season so far. Very similar to Oklahoma State, where we were talking about earlier in the show that, I felt Oklahoma State was in a great position a couple of years ago to really be that premier team in the conference. Baylor was in my top 3. I mean, Coach Arnetta was doing a phenomenal job in 2021. They win the conference. I still think he's a good football coach. Baylor has done a lot of covering up the last decade to kind of put themselves in difficult positions. But, I mean, they've been able to fight through them. But Saturday, just a really, really disappointing performance for a team that's 1-3 right now, and their only wins against Long Island University. So a lot of work ahead for the Bears, and I don't know if they're going to turn it around or not. That's a good Texas team. No shame in losing, but I don't care. Losing on a primetime game by 32 at home, that's never going to taste good.
Yeah, and I mean, as somebody who's seen how Baylor fans consider the Matt Rule hire at Nebraska, I am perfectly okay with ruling Dave Aranda's success early on as just carrying the torch that Matt Rule lit. We'll see how that plays out. I definitely don't think he got dealt a good deck of cards this year by any means. But another, like you said, the team that they'll be squaring up against head to head, prime slots here, that a big noon kickoff slot with Oklahoma. I'm really surprised with how well they've turned things around compared to last year. Dylan Gabriel's been awesome. And then now we're starting to see that Brent Venables defense. They held Cincinnati to 6 points. That's no easy task on the road. Offense didn't light up the scoreboard, but when you have a defense this solid, you don't have to. You just have to go out there, make the right play, keep the other offense off the field, give the defense some breathers, and, walk home with the win.
For OU, it was a defensive clinic on Saturday, and there are better offenses in the conference in Cincinnati, but they had shown the ability to put some fireworks up at times as well. And discipline's the right word when it comes to Coach Brent Venables. This is a program that is extremely good in that regard. What's interesting about OU, and I'll throw Texas in there too, their fan bases, when they made that announcement to go to the SEC, there has been so much nervousness and scared, like, we're not ready. There's no way we're going to compete in that conference. We're going to get killed. And there's a lot of season to go. Next year we'll tell the story initially. But these teams are ready to go into that conference if they're looking to, face off. I mean, for Texas to beat Alabama and for OU to start the way they are, this OU team is tough defensively this year. And you're dead right, Brandon. Dylan Gabriel was not a good QB last year, really disappointing his first year at Oklahoma, especially what, Caleb Williams is doing, winning a Heisman out at USC, who was their QB the year before. But he seems to have really settled in. They're 4-0. They've really put themselves in a nice shape going into this upcoming next few weeks.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at how these teams are built, Oklahoma defensive heavy may not fit the powerhouse offenses that the SEC is accustomed to. It'll be refreshing to see a team who actually plays defense in that conference. So, I mean, I would say that, if you were to put Oklahoma in the SEC today, I don't know. Georgia's a different beast. Mm-hmm. Other than Georgia, I don't know if you have a defense better than Oklahoma's right now.
No, I fully agree. Their defense is just, and I'm not surprised. And that was something that they really struggled in the Lincoln Riley era. They could never find a defense. Their offense, all the quarterbacks that went through that program, when you look at Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Caleb Williams in that final year too. And for them to not, I mean, they made the college football playoff a couple of times. That's an outstanding accomplishment. But outside of that Georgia game, that Baker Mayfield year, they were never competitive. They were always overwhelmed defensively. Joe Burrow, we witnessed a live murder on national television in that semifinal game. So their defense, it takes time to build a system. Coach Venables, they weren't able to establish it perfectly last year, but it seems they definitely seem to have a better base this year. It's paying off to a good start in Norman.
Yeah, and like I said, it'll just be a change of pace. Seeing an SEC team who can play defense. As much as I love the 52-49 shootouts that Alabama and Tennessee got into last year, and the Tennessee Alabama game that put up close to 100 points. I love me some good offense, but it will be refreshing to see a defensive team in the SEC for once. And just kind of skimming through the rest of these games here. Good week for the Big 12. Houston picked up their picked up a win against Sam Houston. Finally found some momentum there. So hopefully they continue that. West Virginia, we already talked about them. Kansas State pulling out kind of a tricky one against UCF. Yeah. Will Howard obviously banged up, but UCF came into Manhattan to play. And then Kansas State pulled away late, but I'm really impressed with both of those teams. I feel
that was my upset special right there. I thought Central Florida had a chance, and they did play a quality football game. It was a 4-point game at halftime, but K-State was terrific. They were really able to move the ball well, over 500 yards of total offense. And Howard, battled throughout the game, but DJ Giddens, my gosh, 207 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns. That's always going to be usually a winning formula. That's just not a losing formula. And the defense was also able to get into the backfield with 8 tackles for loss. So K-State, give them credit after a heavily, heavily disappointing loss to a now ranked Mizzou team to come back in, beat, I think, a actually quality Central Florida team. And I still think the Knights are going to do some decent stuff this in their first season of the Big 12, but a really nice win for them and kind of a bounce back win at home.
Yeah, great spot. And you kind of wonder how these teams are going to, kind of acclimate to the Big 12 and Power 5 football. And I think UCF showed right away that, hey, we've been playing at this level for a little while now. So we're not going to get caught off guard here. And, going toe-to-toe with defending Big 12 champs, a team who's looking to get back to Arlington again this year. Great stuff out of them. Then lastly, and one of the more competitive games in the Big 12 here, Kansas and BYU. Like I said, BYU also in that boat where they want to figure out how to, if they're going to be able to compete in the Power 5. They were leading in halftime on the road against Kansas. Now they eventually kind of pulled away late, won by double digits, but I'm still pretty impressed with BYU. And especially after seeing how Arkansas competed against LSU on Saturday night as well. Maybe that win looking a little bit better than it did even as it was unfolding. BYU's going to be able to compete at this level too.
Yeah, give BYU a lot of credit. I mean, to go back-to-back weeks against Arkansas, usually a competitive team at home, and then an upstart Kansas team, they played a really good football game. They just had no rushing attack whatsoever. And that's a lot to do with Kansas defense. Give them some credit. They were in the backfield all day long. They were able to take advantage of that. Had some big explosive plays in the second half. The rushing game was absolutely terrific. Jalen Daniels, 3 touchdown passes. And look, I felt kind of nutty, couple podcasts ago, putting Kansas as a dark horse for a Big 12 championship game. And I still think it's a little bit nutty, but give them credit. This is a really, really competitive and difficult Kansas team. And this is no longer a pencil in win like it was for so many years in the Big 12. That era is officially done. Lawrence had a sold out stadium on Saturday, and that's something I'm just not used to seeing. Good win for them. And the state of Kansas has some competitive football right now. Definitely some offense in the state of Kansas. Maybe the state of Iowa, Iowa State at least had offense this weekend. I don't know about the team out east. I don't know how that went. But
Oh, I
they
know
got some
exactly
offense in
how that went.
Kansas. Yeah, I know too. So you know what, Brian Ferentz, he can get a lifetime contract for me, but
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
just like kudos to Kansas for just really a workman-like win and continuing to take care of business. Curious how they'll look on the road, especially with a big game this week, and we'll discuss that in the future. But give them credit, and they have a chance to shock the world potentially this week too.
Regardless, Big 12 football is back, and we're here for it. You're listening to Go Big 12 or Go Home. And any final thoughts on week 4 for the Big 12?
Pretty fun week. A lot of, Big 12, I feel like it's always known as kind of a fun mix of you have some big offensive teams, you have some really good defensive teams. Hopefully you're balanced along the middle. But this was a week of really some strong offensive performances across the board. And I think those two Kansas teams really were able to do some solid stuff this week for me. But tip my hat to where it's due. I mean, give Texas a lot of credit. They're really going right now. So is Oklahoma. And I think two head scratchers right now are Oklahoma State and Baylor. I don't know what's going on. I'll even throw Texas Tech in there. I mean, these were, I think, in the preseason rankings, definitely all three were in the upper half of expectations in terms of where they'll finish. And all three look pretty lost in some ways right now. So a lot of questions for those three teams, but hey, plenty of season to go.
Oh, we'll wrap it up there. Later on this week, we'll do our predictions for week 5. Small slates. Not to spoil too much about how we did last week. A lot more wins than losses in the column. I'll tell you that, Drew Russell.
Oh, man. I'm thankful. I'm seeing too many L's. My wallet is as well. So.
It's a tough slate, but I think we got some winners coming up this week, so dial in there. More stuff on the Cornerstone Connection Network. Now able to put out content every single day. Outstanding stuff going on here on the network. So we'll wrap it up. We'll see you later.